So me and my wife, we both have this like continuing argument back and forth, and we kind of tease each other of like who's got better direction sense. Like there's so many times where I find myself getting lost, and then she totally proves that she's better at directions. But then there's so many times also where like she finds herself getting lost, and I'm like, you have no idea where we're at? Like I know where we're at. And I prove to her that I'm better at directions in that moment. And I don't know about you, like maybe you are that way. Maybe you're just awful at directions. You ever found yourself getting lost continuously over and over again? Or maybe you've got a friend who is always 15, 20, 30 minutes late because they chose to turn down a road that they had no clue where it was and where it was going to lead them. Here's the thing that I know about getting lost. First is, you don't get lost on purpose. Like, you don't try to get lost. You don't have the intention of saying, hey, I think I want to get lost today, and you go get lost. No. The second truth I know is this, is that when you get lost, you don't really exactly know when it happened, right? Like, there's no point in your time of driving where, or if you're in the car or you're walking, where you realize, oh, that's where I got lost. No, you're driving along, or you're in the car or in your bike or whatever it may be, and all of a sudden you look around and you start to notice that things are a little unfamiliar. They're not exactly where you thought you'd be. And all of a sudden it kind of dawns on you like, oh crap, I'm lost, right? The third thing I know about being lost is this. Whatever direction you're going, or whatever road you turn down, it will ultimately determine where you end up. Your direction always determines your destination. Here's the deal. Like, you can have the best intentions all you want. Like, you can have all the good intentions of going to Miami Beach, Florida. I mean, you could pack your suitcase full of sunscreen, full of swim clothes. You could pack your tank tops, all your flip-flops, all those things. You could have them all in a bag and have all the good intentions of going to Miami Beach, Florida. But if you get on the interstate and you head north, newsflash, you're not going to end up in Miami Beach, Florida. Because here's the deal. There's this thing that I like to call the path principle. And the path principle says, your direction always determines your destination. The road you get on, you can have all the good intentions in the world. You can have all the good prayers in the world. You can have all the best hopes and dreams in the world. But if you're not headed in the right direction, you're not going to end up where you want to be. Here's the deal. Because your direction determines your destination. There's a story in the Bible, and it's in Proverbs verse 7, and it's written by this guy. He's the wisest man ever to live on the world. His name's Solomon. And Solomon is sitting up in his home, and he's sitting in the window, and he's looking down into the road, and he sees this young man walking. And it actually describes this young man as a kid in his youth. And basically he's pretty much saying, listen, this is probably a middle school or high school kid. You know, he's probably your age. And he's walking down, and he's headed towards this girl's house. Not only is he headed towards this girl's house, but he's headed towards her house right at sunset. It's about to be dark. It's about to be night. It says he's actually heading towards her house during twilight. Now, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out what's going on in this kid's brain. Like, he's headed towards a girl's house at nighttime, and he's all alone. But Solomon, he's sitting here, and he's sitting up in his house, and he's looking down out his window at this kid, and he's kind of narrating what's taking place. He's telling us all, okay, this kid's walking towards her house, and he's kind of narrating all of the he's kind of giving a play-by-play of what this kid's doing and all the decisions that he's making. And in this explanation that Solomon gives us, he kind of depicts to us the path principle that says the direction you're going ultimately determines your destination. This is what he says. At the window of my house, I looked out through the lattice. I saw among the simple, I noticed among the young men a youth who lacked judgment. He was going down the street near her corner, walking along in the direction of her house at twilight. as the day was fading and as the dark of night set in. Then out came a woman to meet him, dressed like a prostitute and with crafty intent. She took hold of him and kissed him, and with a brazen face she said, I have fellowship offerings at home. Today I fulfilled my vows. So I came out to meet you. I looked for you, and I have found you. So I know you probably hear me read this passage, and you're like, I have no idea what she just said, right? Because back in that culture, they just talked differently than we did. Their culture said things different. But once I explained to kind of what she actually said, you'll understand that their culture is not that much different than our culture. She's not that much different than we are. She basically says to him, listen, I'm not a prostitute. Today, I fulfilled my vows. Now, what does that mean? Well, if we kind of put it in layman's terms and we say it in a way that we would have said it, she's basically saying, listen, today, I went to church and I basically asked forgiveness from God. I took my bucket of sin that I have, where all these past relationships or these past experiences with other men that I've had, she said, I basically took my bucket of sin and I dumped it out on the altar to God. And I asked him to forgive me. And she comes to me and she basically says, my bucket's empty now and I'm ready to fill my bucket up with you. Yeah. That is pretty much saying, hey, listen, I'm ready to do whatever sinful thing I want to do with you. And isn't that what we do? I mean, maybe we don't necessarily do like prostitute things, obviously, but maybe think about how we are, how we continually go to church and we ask, God, will you forgive me of this sin that I keep committing over and over and over and over again? And we go to him and we ask for forgiveness. And then we go back outside of church and we go back into our normal everyday lives. And then all of a sudden, what do? We commit the same sin again and again and again. And then we find ourselves going back to church, asking forgiveness again. It's like we've learned to just abuse this thing that God calls grace. We've learned his system, right? We know that he will always forgive us. If we come to him with sin, he'll always give us forgiveness. And then we can go back out, and if we mess up again, we can come back to him and he'll forgive us again. And so we've learned how it all works, and we tend to abuse it, and we mistreat God's grace. And Solomon, he goes on to say this, with persuasive words, she led him astray. She seduced him. With her smooth talk, all at once, he followed her like an ox, going to the slaughter, like a deer stepping into a noose till an arrow pierces his liver, like a bird darting into a snare, little knowing it will cost him his life. So Solomon, he's kind of depicted this whole story to us, right? He's telling us this story about this young man who's probably a teenager. He's probably middle school or high school age. And he's headed towards this girl's house. And we all know this kid's intentions. We know exactly what he's got planned in his mind. We know exactly what he wants to do. But here's the deal. Solomon all of a sudden gets to this point in the passage, in this story, where he takes the focus off this kid and he turns it towards the reader. He turns it to us and he causes us to think inwardly about our own situation. And this is what he says in verse 24. He says, now then, my sons, listen to me. Pay attention to what I say. Do not let your heart turn to her ways or stray into her paths. This dude is probably thinking like, paths? What are you talking about? This is just one single event. This is an amazing opportunity that I have to score with this girl, and you're going to mess it all up by just causing me to talk about all these paths and try to get me to focus on these directions and these roads that I'm leading down. And don't we do the same thing? I mean, we say stuff like this. We say stuff like, it's just prom, right? We say stuff like, listen, it's just spring break. It's just one kiss. It's just one night. And we only focus on the here and the now. And Solomon, he's trying to get us to focus on our tomorrow. He's like, listen, it's not just one moment. it's not just one decision. This is a path that you're headed down. This is a direction that you're headed towards that will ultimately determine your destination. See, our culture feeds us lies, and it tells us, as long as you've got good intentions, as long as you're a good person, it doesn't matter. You'll end up fine. It'll be okay, no big deal. As long as you got good intentions, you'll be fine. But the reality is so many times we ignore the reality of our direction determines our destination. And we think of things like, for instance, you may say something like, I would love to marry a man who really loves God. I would love to have a family one day where we are completely in love with God and we're such picture perfect and we do everything right. And I want somebody who is passionate about God and wants God to be the center of our marriage. But yet, for now, I'm just gonna date whoever thinks I'm cute in high school, right? And we forget about the long term, and all we focus on is the here and the now. Or maybe we say something like this. We say something like, I would love to know God so well. I would like my relationship with God to be so strong. And I want to know, I see people who read the Bible and they know the Bible backwards and forwards. And whenever they get in a situation, they can just quote scripture that really helps to encourage them and their faith. But for now, when I get up in the morning, I'm just going to read Facebook. Forget about the Bible now. I'm going to focus on the here and now, and I'm just curious of what people are saying in the news feed. And it's a contrast of realities. Here's the deal is your direction, the path you choose, the choices you make, they determine your destination. Not your intentions, not your hopes, not your dreams. Wherever you're headed will ultimately determine where you end up. And so my question is this: the path you're on right now, the choices that you're making right now, where are they leading you? Where will you end up?